today I'm going to show you how to print onto fabric. I've shown how to print onto paper, and printing onto fabric is a really fantastic way to be able to create kind of usable art. I have pre-carved a little house plant. If you're interested in learning how to do the carving stage, I recommend you check the video in the description below or linked on my blog post. Because I don't want to show how to, or what really just want to focus on how to block print onto fabric itself in this video. I will recommend that if you are choosing to print onto fabric, use a softer, rubberier lino plate, so something that has a little bit of give that prints a lot nicer onto fabric than kind of the traditional battleship gray type lino blocks or wood. Okay, so you'll need a few things to be able to print on fabric. One, you're going to need some sort of a fabric. I have two fabrics here that I'm going to show. Both are 100% cotton. So this first one is a white bandana. You can see it's very thin, which is what bandanas are meant to be like, and it's quite large. You can buy these pre-made. You can make them yourself, but they would be, take some decent sewing skills. So I just bought these off the internet, and they print really, really nicely. And the other item, and this is what I print onto quite a bit, is a flour sack tea towel. And it is also 100% cotton, and it prints really, really nicely. And they're, the inks we're using, and these work really, really nicely together. I have some that I've washed probably 100 times, and they're still looking great. So that's just a little bit about fabric. I mostly only work on 100% cotton or blends that are mostly cotton. Sometimes I've had, a little bit of rayon or something. If I've done like an infinity scarf or something like that, these still work, but I'm most familiar with cotton or almost near 100% cotton. Okay, so now let's talk about ink. So I use pretty much only one brand of fabric block printing ink because I've had a lot of luck with it. So you can get the Speedball block printing ink in a variety of colors. I printed a lot in the different colors, but mostly I print in black, and the black works really, really nicely, and the colors work really, really nicely as well. The white is a challenge. I don't recommend printing only with white because it just doesn't show up. So if you're printing white, obviously you wouldn't print white onto a white material. You'd use it on a dark fabric. But it just doesn't have the opacity that you need to be able to print onto a dark fabric. But you can use the white to blend with the different colors to make a paler color. But today we're just going to print with black. So the other items you'll need is something to roll your ink out onto. So this is like a plexiglass plate that I just bought from a store that was going out of business. And this was shelving actually, but it's a nice thick plexiglass plate. I cleaned it up, but there's a little bit of staining on it, but that's okay. And that just protects your surface as you roll the ink out onto it. And you need something to roll the ink with, and I use this brayer from Speedball. It's nice and soft. It's a little bit shiny because there's a thing with the Speedballs when you clean it. It gets sticky, and I have a little bit of staining there. I didn't clean it perfectly last time, but that won't be an issue because it's black with black. Okay, so before we roll out the ink, you'll want to place your fabric in a place that won't get dirty from where you're rolling out your ink. Now, I always print on above this cutting mat because it has lines on it, so I can, if I want to do multiple prints, I can kind of line things up, and I can put little markers here and there. So that's a tip if you're wanting to do multiple prints. So for this, I don't have a ton of space, but I want to be able to show you printing two different prints. But we'll start with one, and then we'll move on to the other and just kind of readjust the fabric. So you take your ink and you squeeze some out onto your palette. And it can be different consistencies depending how old it is. Sometimes it's been sitting and it kind of separates. So sometimes you'll get kind of an oily material coming out before the rest of your ink. That's okay because you will roll it. This one's thicker, probably because I haven't used it in a little while. So you start and you just kind of lift up and set down, lift up and set down, because you want to make sure that you get ink all the way around. Now I have way too much ink. So we move to different areas of this plexiglass. And as you do this, it kind of mills it a little bit further. And just get a nice kind of a smooth application on your brayer. Now, I'm actually going to move this fabric out of the way just for a moment. I'm just going to fold it upwards because we're going to do a couple of test prints on paper. And it's important to do test prints because your first couple of prints are always really not great. And it's just how it is. Doesn't matter who you are. It takes a couple layers for the ink to just adhere nicely. Okay, so now we have this on the brayer. So now you get to roll it out onto your print. And reapply because you want to make sure you get a nice even layer throughout. And this is just a test print, so it doesn't need to be perfect, but you do want to get your ink kind of everywhere because you want, as you do your test prints, you get just kind of like a thin layer on there, and it prints better. So I just lay the paper on top. This is just some scrap newsprint. Then lift it up. Set that to the side. I'm going to do another one. We're going to get a bit more ink onto this. And again, remember to lift up and then roll. Put it back down and roll. Lift up and roll. And this makes sure that you're not just getting ink in the same spot each time. Like if you didn't lift up and roll back and forth, you run risk of not fully applying your ink. So now roll it on, and it's harder to see where you've been, so you just kind of have to remember. And make sure you get a good application. You can also lean down, kind of take a look, kind of angle it to the light, and make sure that there's an even application. Now, I have this. I just fold this over because I don't want to get the wet ink. And I just do another test print. There you go. Test prints are looking pretty good. I'm just going to fold that over again, just so I don't get ink in places I don't want to. Okay, now I'm going to put my print up there, or my plate up there, my carving, and I'm going to bring back down my fabric that I just folded up. Now, I know where I want to print this. I'm going to print it right about here. And now let's add ink. Now, if you block printed onto paper, you just want a really, really thin but even application of ink. But with fabric, you actually want a little bit of a thicker application. So I'm just going to put a bit more than I normally would have for paper. And again, lift up, roll, mill. But because fabric has a lot of kind of texture to it, even though flour sack tea towels don't have much texture. Oh, I got a little something on there. Let me just clean that off. I don't know what that was. Could be something from the ink. It's always handy to have like baby wipes beside, because now I pulled that, whatever that was, off of my plate. You kind of need to clean your hands off because you don't want to get inky fingerprints onto everything, onto what you're printing. Okay, now because I pulled something off of it, I want to reapply ink to make sure I am not missing ink, an inkless spot on this. Okay, so now double check, hands are clean. Take your inked carving. Now you want your fabric on the table, and you want to flip your carving over. Now I know I want this approximately right here, and you want to set it straight down. And you set it straight down, you set it straight down once, and you can press on it on its back. Now, depending if you've printed a lot with paper, you might have use like a wooden spoon, or you might use a baren like this, which is what you use to press on it. You can do that, but because your paper is not on top, it's on the bottom, you want to take another piece of paper on top if you're going to rub it with anything, and just rub it gently, because this allows your wooden spoon or your baren to be able to move over it smoothly without kind of moving it around, because you don't want to move it around or else you'll get a smudgy print. But you do want to make sure that you press well, and you can just press with your hand. If you're pressed with your hand, just press down. You can do that with your baren as well, because you only get one chance of this. Now, the nice thing about printing on fabric is it doesn't need to be perfect. You're block printing. If you wanted it to be perfectly inked across, you would do screen printing. But this is block printing, so that unevenness is part of its beauty. Now, when you remove this, you want to lift it without kind of moving it, because you don't want it to smudge. So you can pull it up, it kind of peels off, and there you go. There is the very first block print. And I think that looks pretty good. Now, a couple of tips before I show the second printing. When you're choosing your design, you want something that doesn't have too much detail, because a piece of fabric can only handle so much detail because of its weave. So this one is about as far as I would go for detail. And I purposefully chose like a very simple, very graphic design that I thought would really pop. So I'm pretty happy with this. Now I'm going to do a second print, because you can do multiple prints. Now I just need to adjust where this will lay. So I'm just going to slide it down, because I know with my overall design, because I want to be able to show this to you on camera, and my camera is in a fixed spot here and I'm running out of table space. So I'm just going to, I know I'm going to want one that's up near the top here. So, and be careful when you're moving your fabric around now, because now you have wet ink, but I know I want the next print to be right here. So again, roll, lift, and roll, lift, and roll. You can do some back and forth, but remember, lift, add a bit of fresh ink, and when you think it's ready, then start applying it to your plate, adding a bit more to the brayer. And you can take a look at it in the light, make sure it looks okay. Now, I'm going to do again, flip it over. Now, I'm showing you the second one because you definitely want to be able to, or you definitely want to reapply ink. You don't want to do one print and then print again on the fabric, because you've really used up the ink that you had on there. There's a tiny little bit left, so you might get a bit of a ghost, but it's not going to look as nice as you want it, because you want a fair amount of ink to apply. So again, rub it, remove that piece of paper, and lift up. And there we go. We now have our second printing. I'm just going to gently fold this down so you can see both of them together. And you can see this one had a lot more ink on it, nice and crisp. This one a little bit, some of it is a little bit softer. That's completely fine. That is the joy of block printing. And the joy of block printing onto fabric is you get that nice kind of texture to it. I'm going to do a few more prints onto the specific tea towel, and then I will show you what it looks like at the end. But a couple pieces of advice for when you're printing onto fabric. You want something with a fairly tight weave, because you're going to have some weave show through, and a little bit of weave showing through is fine, but if it's a really, really textured weave, it can be really difficult to block print onto, because you need to be able to kind of press your plate, your carving, onto the fabric, and if it's a really thick weave, you're not getting into the fabric as much. So just keep that in mind when you're printing. Another thing to keep in mind too, I didn't put anything underneath this piece of fabric when I printed, because flour sack tea towels are kind of a nice thickness that there's a little bit of a give, both from this carving itself because I used the rubbery material, but also from the fabric itself. So there's just kind of like a softness on both sides when you're printing, and it kind of just works out to kind of get the ink where it's supposed to go. Now I'll just shift this out of the way, or when I'm printing a bandana, this is a really thin material. There's no kind of give to this material. I would take a material similar to a flour sack tea towel and layer it underneath this, and that gives it that kind of push and pull. Now I'm just going to quickly do the rest of this printing, and I will show it to you in a moment once it's done. Okay, I finished it. Now the camera doesn't go wide enough to be able to show everything, but basically I did 5 little houseplants and something like this. It's great for somebody who obviously loves houseplants. Great sort of a gift. They can be really customized. You're just limited by what you're able to draw and the amount of detail that you would be able to put into this. But I hope you have fun trying out block printing on fabric and showing off what you've managed to make. One last thing, you'll need to dry this for 1 week, and you don't want to touch it. It'll dry to the touch, in 2 or 3 days. But right now, you're going to want to hang this up somewhere. So I will often fold it in half with the ink side out and hang it that way. On some sort of like a drying rack, like one of those laundry gull wing drying rack hangers, something like that. But just be very, very careful, because you can get ink from the prints that you've done onto other parts of the fabric, and then that's in there forever, because like I said, this stuff washes really, really nicely once it's set. You don't have to heat set or anything like that. So just be a little bit careful with it. The odd little smudge, tiny little smudge is okay, especially if it's sort of near the where you've printed, because that's just part of the look, but you don't want to smudge over in this area. So just be careful at this point, let it dry a week, and then you're good to go.